These are the 10 US medical specialties that pay the most per hour, and 3 that just missed the cut. Each of them makes over $200 an hour, with one clocking in at over $300. Having graduated from Stanford Medical School, then Harvard MGH for residency, I'm asked regularly for residency and career advice. As such, I spent an embarrassing number of hours over the past several months poring over hundreds of pages of documents. Stick around to the end where I'll reveal the least competitive specialties that make the most. Let's dive in. One of my best friends from Stanford is in Otolaryngology, or ENT, which is number 10 on the list. He told me that the joke is that ENT stands for every night tennis. I think that sums up well why it's one of the highest paid and most competitive medical specialties. Annual compensation is $502,543, and with annual hours worked, about 2,426, the average hourly rate is $207.20. As I mentioned, it's very competitive. For USMD seniors who applied only ENT in the match, the unmatched rate was 16.2%, meaning that of all of the USMD seniors that applied to only ENT, 16.2% did not match. And overall, if we include IMGs, DOs, and US graduates, the unmatched rate is 26.8%, so that's quite high. ENT's hourly rate of $207.20 is slightly higher than gastroenterology's, which just missed the top 10, which was $204.86. However, in general, ENTs work fewer hours annually at 24.26 hours versus 25.10 for gastroenterology, which results in a lower annual compensation. So again, if you look at just the annual numbers, ENT might come out as less. However, because these calculations are factoring in the number of hours worked annually, you can actually see that they make a little bit more per hour. Compared to family medicine, otolaryngology provides a significantly higher hourly rate of $207.20 versus $130.56, and slightly more annual hours, which results in a much higher annual compensation at $502,000 versus about $300,000 for family medicine. Number 9 on our list is a specialty that's memorialized as one of the road specialties that have a great lifestyle combination of both high pay without working lots of hours. That's right, ophthalmology. Annual compensation is about $468,000, and with annual hours worked about 2,200, the average hourly rate is $212.56. Because of this, it's highly competitive, with an unmatched USMD senior rate of 25% and an overall unmatched rate of 34%. Ophthalmology showcases a balance between work hours and compensation. When you compare it to something like pediatrics, ophthalmology offers both a much higher hourly rate at $212.56 versus $112.19 for pediatrics, and slightly fewer work hours annually, where pediatrics comes in at 2,313. That translates to a significantly higher annual salary of $468,581 versus $259,572. Number 8 on our list is cardiology, which illustrates how different compensation lists can look if you are looking at just the annual compensation as opposed to hourly compensation. If you were to look at only annual compensation, it would be number 6 on this list, with an annual compensation of $565,485 on average. However, because it's number 2 on the list in terms of annual hours worked at 2,622.6, it ends up being the number 8 highest paid specialty per hour at $215.62. That doesn't stop it from being one of the most competitive specialties on this list, with an unmatched rate of 32.3% overall. Now, granted, the fellowship data is a little bit different, right? Because cardiology is a fellowship off of internal medicine, so the process is different than, say, matching into residency. But for comparison purposes, the unmatched rate for people that are applying into cardiology from internal medicine, the unmatched rate is extremely high. And if it were for, say, a residency spot, it would be one of the most competitive on this list. So for example, if we compare cardiologists' hourly compensation of $215.62 per hour versus radiologists of $223.45, you would think that cardiologists would make less per year. However, because cardiologists are working significantly more hours, about 2,600 hours versus about 2,380 hours for radiologists, the cardiologists still have a higher annual compensation. And so they came out at $565,485 versus radiology, which was $531,983. Number 7 on our list is another of the road specialties, radiology. Annual compensation is $531,983, with annual hours worked at about 2,380. The average hourly rate is $223.45. The unmatched rate is 7.8% for USMD seniors and overall was 14.8%. So despite making a lot per hour, it's actually one of the less competitive specialties on this list. That said, compared to something like family medicine, radiologists have a much higher hourly rate, where family medicine is $130.56, and because they work slightly more annual hours, that translates to significantly higher annual compensation at $531,983 versus about $300,000 for family medicine. So how do you think the increasing role of AI in medical imaging might affect the future job market and compensation for radiologists? Be sure to let us know in the comments. Number 6 on our list is dermatology, and it's known as one of the premier medical lifestyle specialties. It combines high pay, fewer insurance headaches, and minimal call. It also has the fewest hours worked on this top 10 list, and the third fewest hours worked among all specialties for which I could find data, behind occupational medicine and pediatric emergency medicine. What I found interesting is that for all that is made of how great the lifestyle is for dermatology and how few hours they work, they still work more than the average full-time employee works in the United States. Dermatologists work an average of 2,044.6 hours, whereas the average US worker works only 1,892 hours per year. Annual compensation for dermatologists was $493,659, and their average hourly rate then would be $241.45. Dermatology is obviously extremely competitive with an unmatched rate of 22.1% for USMD seniors and 30.1% overall. Let us know in the comments how much of that you think is attributable to lifestyle versus other factors. Number 5 on our list is radiation oncology. Annual compensation is $569,170, and with annual hours worked of about 2,276, the average hourly rate is $250. The unmatched rate, remarkably, most recently was 0% for USMD seniors and 8.6% overall. Radiation oncology presents a unique case of high compensation and low competition, at least recently. Its $250 an hour rate is higher than radiology's at $223.45, and despite working fewer hours annually than radiologists on average, the average radiation oncologist earns more annually at $569,170 versus $531,983. Radiation oncology has the lowest unmatched rate among these specialties that we discuss. So what factors do you think contribute to this unique combination of high pay and, at least recently, low competition? Let us know in the comments. Speaking of competitiveness, to see just how much money matters to getting into a particular residency, I graphed the average hourly rate for the US specialties in the NRMP data against the unmatched MD senior rate for those same specialties. The idea was I wanted to see if there was a positive correlation between the two, meaning if specialties made more per hour, it also meant that they would be more competitive. Not surprisingly, there was a fairly strong correlation with an R squared of about 0.472. This little dot down here is radiation oncology, and so it's, like we said, kind of the outlier. So if we take out our outlier of radiation oncology, the correlation becomes even stronger with an R squared of about 0.676. What I find fascinating is that for something that is obviously super important, like how much one makes per hour, the standard advice for interviews and the like is to never talk about being interested in a field because of money. Let us know in the comments what you think about that, and if money is something that we should be talking about more or less in medicine. So number 4 on our list is thoracic surgery, a specialty that doesn't get a lot of love on many of the national surveys that you'll see. For example, it's not listed in the Medscape survey or many other posts or videos you'll find online. It does, however, showcase how high work hours combined with a high hourly rate result in significant annual compensation. Its $257.22 hourly rate is slightly lower than orthopedic surgeries, but thoracic surgeons work more hours annually at about 2,801 hours versus 2,534, resulting in a higher annual compensation of $720,634 versus $654,815. As you might imagine, it is extremely competitive, with the most recent data that I could find being that of the people that applied, 40% did not match for the fellowship of thoracic surgery, which would make it the most competitive on this entire list if we were to try to compare apples to apples. Let us know in the comments if that is surprising to you, that the most competitive specialty on this list would be thoracic surgery, and if you think that that's accurate. Number 3 on our list is orthopedic surgery. So compared with general surgery, orthopedic surgeons earn significantly more per hour at $258.43 versus $168.43 for general surgeons, while also working slightly fewer hours at 2,533.9 versus general surgery, which is 2,755. It leads to a much higher annual compensation of $654,815 versus for general surgeons of $464,071 on average. As such, it's not surprising that it is also highly competitive. Since it's a residency, we can look at the USMD senior data, which shows that 23.1% of the USMD seniors didn't match that applied to only orthopedic surgery, and that 26.7% overall, so that includes IMGs, DOs, and USMD graduates. Number 2 on our list is plastic surgery. Its $258.78 hourly rate is nearly identical to orthopedic surgeries at $258.43, yet its annual compensation is lower at $619,812 versus $654,815. This is basically due to working fewer hours at $2,395 versus $2,533.9 for orthopedic surgery. Compared to internal medicine, plastic surgeons earn significantly more per hour, making basically over double while also working slightly fewer hours. Because of this, their annual compensation is nearly double at $619,812 versus $312,526. The specialty's 22% unmatched rate for MD seniors is lower than neurosurgery's, suggesting that it is, at least recently, a slightly less competitive field despite similar financial rewards. This brings us to our number 1 highest paid US medical specialty per hour, which is neurosurgery. So what's surprising is that neurosurgery, like thoracic surgery, is often not listed among the top specialties you'll find in other places. It's the only specialty on this list making more than $300 per hour, earning $303.41 compared to psychiatry's, which is $106.50, the lowest paid specialty per my calculations. Neurosurgeons work about 2,583 hours annually, which is significantly more than dermatology's, which is the lowest in the top 10. This combination of both high hourly rate and more work hours on average results in also the highest annual compensation of $783,908, which compared to psychiatry's is nearly triple. Despite the sky-high pay both per hour and annually, neurosurgery's 27.1% unmatched rate for USMD seniors is only slightly higher than ophthalmology's at 25%, suggesting that while it's competitive, other factors beyond just salary influence specialty choice. When you look at how much a neurosurgeon makes per hour, what do you think? Does that make sense? Is that even fair? Let us know in the comments. And as promised, here are the top 3 specialties that just missed the cut. Number 11 on the list is oncology, with an annual compensation of $479,754 and annual hours worked of 2,317.6. The average hourly rate is $207. The unmatched rate is about 20% overall for the fellowship match. Gastroenterology is another fellowship off of internal medicine with an annual compensation of $514,308. With annual hours worked of 2,510, the average hourly rate works out to about $205 per hour. The unmatched rate is very high at 33.9% overall in the fellowship match data. Number 13 would be urology, with annual compensation of $529,140 and annual hours worked of 2,625.6. That computes to an average hourly rate of $201.53. The unmatched USMD senior rate for urology was about 13%. And finally, these are the top paying specialties that are the least competitive, as judged by having an unmatched rate less than 5% for USMD seniors. If you're looking just at competitiveness and average hourly compensation, radiation oncology would come on top with an average hourly rate of $250 and the unmatched MD senior rate of 0% for the last NRMP match data. Another that would make the list would be emergency medicine, with an annual compensation of $398,990. The average hourly rate works out to be about $187.22. It had an unmatched USMD senior rate of only 1.7% as of the last match data. Now that you know the 10 US medical specialties earning the most per hour, what do you think? Anything surprise you? And considering all the data that we've seen, how much do you think compensation should factor into choosing a specialty compared to other aspects like personal interest, lifestyle, and competitiveness? Be sure to let us know in the comments. And if you want to know how to increase your chances of matching, be sure to check out this video where I'll discuss the 5 secrets that helped me match at Harvard.